Known as one of the older ports in Rio de Janeiro, Porto Maravilha used to be one of the busiest and most profitable ports in the world. Throughout the 1800s, the port was mostly utilized for slave trade. Porto Maravilha at the time was the epicenter of slave trade and at one point was transporting over 100,000 slaves from the transatlantic trade. Although with advancements being made in other surrounding ports and the outlawing of slavery shortly on, Porto Maravilha began to fall behind and decline economically. This caused an increase in poverty and a lack of jobs. As other surrounding ports found other alternatives to slave trade, Porto Maravilha began to decline and caused some to move out of the city. With the mid-1900s approaching, the city tried to revive by installing a large highway that cut directly through the city, creating a more industrial environment added to the poverty and economic decline that already loomed. Buildings and homes in some areas were being abandoned and left, creating the favelas that reside nearby. Just recently, with the 2016 Olympics being held in Rio, this was Porto Maravilha's chance to completely revive itself into the booming port that it used to be. To accomplish the futuristic vision that the city had, they began by instilling new laws that encouraged businesses within the private sector. To accomplish this, they created what's called a PPP loan, which allowed for a new way of funding. These were used to attract private builders and businesses to help accomplish the city's overall vision. Their goal was to demolish and create a new form of public housing, transportation, and a way to preserve the port's history while at the same time attracting tourists. Upon starting the project, the City Hall utilized a form of eminent domain to allow the city to make all future decisions regarding the developments. The goals were to relocate and revitalize some of the surrounding neighborhoods, create new modes of transportation, such as by train, create sustainable public areas that will encourage locals and tourists to walk or bike places, and create more efficient routes to minimize traffic congestion. Surrounding this, they also want to incorporate museums and art to preserve the rich history that the port held. Getting started, the city had raised upwards of $60 million to be able to rejuvenate the surrounding neighborhoods, while the private sector and businesses began to work on updating the city, creating new roads, hotels, museums, and buildings. Another thing that the city had implemented was a tunnel that would help mitigate traffic and lower congestion coming to and from the city. The city also wanted to incorporate sustainability into the project, such as planting over 15,000 trees, creating lots of public spaces that utilize greenery, and by also putting in more sidewalks. Another sustainable feature that they included were new water galleries to offset the rising sea level in the coming future. The project was extremely thought out and took into consideration every angle of the port, including updating the trash and sanitation for the upcoming Olympic Games and even redesigning communication by burying fiber optic cables throughout the city. The construction started by demolishing the large highway that cut right through the heart of the city. After demolishing it, they began constructing the large public city center and museum that stands at the edge of the port. While the city planned and tried to construct the social housing that was being relocated, the private businesses began constructing the new apartments. At the time before construction, the city apartments only held around 30,000 people. The goal after construction was not only to attract more people, but to house over 100,000. They also began constructing the many hotels that will be utilized not only for the Olympic Games, but also for the museums and more tourists that the city will attract with all of the new renovations. With the renovations and developments completed in time for the 2016 Olympic Games, it seemed that Operation Porto Maravilha was a huge success. The dramatic changes to the city's infrastructure, more public areas to accommodate tourists and citizens, hotels for the growing tourist population, museums to preserve the rich history, new roads and traffic alterations to mitigate the heavy traffic, and even a new basis for the growing economy. Although, the town hall didn't do as good of a job as it should have when it came to relocating the social housing and the favelas that resided nearby. Relocating the favelas and social housing may have made the new renovations in the city look nice and cleaner, but they had evicted hundreds of families, assuring them that they would be relocated into new and different apartments nearby, although the city had greatly underestimated the amount of apartments needed to house them. For the over 200 families that had been evicted, the city had only constructed 34 apartments, which is well under what was needed to house some of these families. A lot of the locals and residents that resided in the favelas say that they feel they were betrayed by their local government, saying that the local government came in, took what was theirs, and stated that they would relocate them into different areas. Although the relocated areas were in the same or worse condition than where they used to reside. Some families didn't even have places to stay. Lots of the locals say that they now live in fear that the city will evict them and attempt to relocate them again.